Hi everyone, welcome to the Zapsec Modernization series. My name is Rohan, I'm the founder and CEO of Zapsec. With me is Ray Garg, who's an IAM architect at Zapsec, and today we're going to be discussing why identity is the enterprise control plane and not a cost center. Every budget cycle, I pretty much hear the same question from CIOs. Why does identity cost this much, and what are we really getting for it? Honestly, the way most organizations have set it up, it's a fair question. You typically have 5+ identity platforms bolted together. This provisioning backlogs delaying onboarding. Product teams are waiting months on months on end to integrate a single application. The thing is, it feels like overhead because it's operating like overhead. But the whole issue is that this is a setup problem. It isn't really an identity problem.
That's a great point, Rohan. Yeah, and the way to reframe it is to borrow a concept from networking. So what's that, right? So we have a control plane and a data plane. And the control plane does not carry traffic. It decides how traffic gets routed. And identity should work that same way. So the identity platform should be the layer deciding who gets access to what and under what conditions and for how long. So we're looking at things like authentication, authorization, policy evaluation, all flowing through one orchestration layer. When that's fragmented across, let's say, six different tools with six different policy models, you don't have a control plane anymore. You have six independent decision points that aren't really coordinating together. So that's where that friction comes in.
Yeah, Ray, I actually had a financial services CIO quantify it once, right? I just asked him a question straight up. And, the answer was really surprising. Every new SaaS application for them required like 23 to 30 days of identity integration. And that isn't because the app was complicated, it's because the identity stack was.
Yeah, no, 23 days is kind of crazy for people wiring up authentication and authorization across disconnected systems. That's not really a limitation anymore. That's an architecture problem.
So, in the real world, right, what would you say it looks like when you go ahead and consolidate everything into a real control plane?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean I think a product team, if they onboard a new application, they should do it by calling standard APIs. And authentication should route through one provider, authorization should be through a centralized policy engine. And the product team is not thinking about plumbing. They're integrating and going. And mergers and acquisitions are a lot more quicker and the time to value is a lot faster.
You mentioned M&A. That's a really interesting point, right? Because, in the field, we've actually seen enterprises cut down that integration time by 40% in the first year. So weeks and weeks down to days. It isn't magic. Essentially, go ahead and think about the situation, right? An enterprise acquires another company, and all of a sudden, you need 3,000 people in your environment. Now, what's going to be the critical part for that? It is not really anything else apart from identity. A control plane with federated trust and standard provisioning goes ahead and implies that day one access happens in hours. It's not months and months of integration work.
Yeah, M&A is really important to see the time to value, and there's a governance side to it too. You have centralized authorization, which means you write that policy code once and it applies everywhere. And so if you have your CISO saying that financial data requires step-up authentication, for example, that gets defined in one place and it gets enforced at every access point. So it's not re-implemented independently in like tons and tons of applications.
And that really connects directly back into audit, right? You have identity teams spending like, 8, 9, 10, 12 weeks prepping for access reviews simply because the evidence is scattered everywhere. You centralize everything in the control plane, you centralize all of the evidence. Centralize all of the evidence, the certification cycles what go from months to weeks.
Yeah, and the signal quality continues to compound when you centralize everything. Every access decision goes through one layer. That gives you a clean data stream. It gives you everything in one go, like who accessed what from what device, and what under what policy. That's able to feed your risk engine and your anomaly detection. That's something that's really hard to get with a fragmented stack.
Yeah, and kind of coming back to the point, right, which is the budget conversation. Identity keeps getting funded as the cost center because really that's how it gets presented. It's password resets, ticket closes, licenses renewed. But when you go ahead and present it as the control plane, then the entire conversation shifts. Now you're talking about acquisition speed, integration speed, product team throughput, consistent policy enforcement, audit friction elimination. That's an operating model argument. And that's really what goes ahead and secures that multi-year funding.
Yeah, the business outcomes are really there. And it doesn't mean ripping everything out. We start with a clear target architecture. We're able to sequence the work in increments, in phases, and we're able to see results very fast, without a multi-year commitment up front. So, yeah.
And that's the key, right? It's not about buying new tools. It's about repositioning what the identity does for the enterprise, which is at the control plane and not really at the cost center. And with that, we can go ahead and conclude for today. Thanks for watching. Zapsec helps enterprises design and implement identity as the control plane. If this resonates with what you're working through, we'd be glad to continue the conversation. Please reach out to us either on or our website or the numbers you have on the screen. Thank you.